Good evening, high school ministry. My name is Cameron Rich, and I lead the high school team here. And I am so excited to be up here tonight and talk to you. How many of you are dressed in how many of you wore something from school today? Like you saw on Instagram? So where's, I'll just say a few. I'm not going to be able to say everyone else. Say a few. Where are my Eastern people at? Eastern High School. Oh, no. Okay, what about, we'll just do this right now. Homeschool students of any sort, of any place. It might be our second biggest school. It's just the collection of homeschool. What about, who goes to Male anymore? Does anyone go to Male High School anymore? All right, there they are. There's the 7 or 8 of them that do. What about Cal? We got any Cal kids that go here? So some of you, again, some of us love school. Actually, who loves school? Like, just go nuts if you love school. Yeah, you're about that fun if you love school. How many of you hate school? Why did I just hear more guy voices when I asked that question? Some of us are very involved in school. Others of us do the bare minimum. Some of us drive. How many of you drive very far to go to school? You go a very long distance. And again, this is more directed at our homeschool. How many of you just walk down to your living room or kitchen and go to school? Some of you just do that. There are close to, I just want you to know, there are close to like 30 different schools represented in this room in our high school ministry. And we love all of them as a church, but none of them are perfect. None of your schools are perfect. Again, some of you guys might have a lot of school pride and you're really proud of where you go, but it's not a perfect place to go to school. In fact, I want to give you a chance to air out a school grievance with someone sitting next to you. You have 5 seconds to share with your neighbor one thing you don't like about your school that you'd want to change. 3, 2, 1, go. All right. That's it. That's enough grievances. How many of you said something about the food? How many of you don't like the food at your school? You would change food if you could. If you're a homeschool person, that's very rude to your parents. How many of you would change, is the workload, like homework, that's too much? How many of you would change that? Yeah? How many of you would change like a teacher? Like there's just one teacher that you have. It's like, if I could just sub this person out. Okay. How many of you, you just wish your sports teams were better? Like, you show up on a Friday night, they just get trashed every single week. Someone just comes in. Yeah, I understand. There are, like I said, I'm going to ask, okay. Order in the court. There are close to 30 schools represented in this place. I'm sure you would change something if you could. You just shared with your neighbor. I want you to close your eyes now. Don't share this one with anyone. Just keep it to yourself until the end of service. I want you to listen up. Close your eyes for this one. If God walked through the doors of your school tomorrow, if God actually showed up at school tomorrow, what's one thing you'd want him to change? It's one thing to be like, oh, I want the food to be different. I don't like my teacher. My homework's too much. If the God who created everything showed up to your school tomorrow, where would you need him to show up? What would you need him to do? Where do you need God's help? And maybe you're in this place, and there's a lot of people that show up every week here that are in this place. Maybe you're in this place and you don't believe in God. If he was real, imagine for a minute that God was real and he was capable of anything. What would you want him to do in your school? You can open your eyes. For the next 6 weeks, here's what we're going to do. We're joining the rest of our church in a series called Full Force. Here's what that means. For 6 weeks, we are going to look at our vision statement as a church, and that is to unleash the full force of the church to love people one at a time. It's written all over our walls. We post about it on social media a lot. We talk about it from stage a lot. We're going to talk about it for the next 6 weeks a lot. It's because it's helpful to know what our church wants to do, especially if you're new here and you're just checking out church for the first time and you're kind of investigating it. You don't really know what you believe or what you want. It might be nice for you to know what target we're shooting at as a church. That's it right there. We want to unleash the full force of the church to love people one at a time. But that doesn't answer all the questions you might have about the vision of this church, such as, how do we do that? Where do I start? That sounds nice, but what are you, a high school student, supposed to do with that information? That is what we are going to talk about for the next 6 weeks. The what is super clear. Again, we post it on social, it's on our walls, we say it all the time. We have shirts that say it. The what is clear. The how, if you don't understand how to do it, who cares what we call you to? We need to be a church that teaches you how to be unleashed. And if you're new here, We want you to understand a couple things and feel like you belong and trust Jesus before we unleash you. So that's what we're going to explore. We will slowly work through just one chapter of the Bible for 6 weeks. We're not going to jump all over the place to confuse you a ton. One chapter, 6 weeks, right at home, Romans 12, you know where to go every single week. And we're just going to get a clear idea of how to see this vision of our church come to life. So if you got Bibles, open up to Romans 12. If you don't, it's okay. It's going to be on the screen behind me. Here's a little context because some of you don't know what Romans is. Romans is a letter written by a guy named Paul. So we call it a book of the Bible, but what it really was a letter. A guy named Paul, who was a leader in the church back in the day, wrote a letter to a church, kind of like ours, in Rome. Like if he was to write one today, it would be called Louisvillians. That would be like the name of the book, right? He would write a letter to the church of Louisville, and we would read it because we live in Louisville and we follow Jesus together. So that's what he did. God wanted to unleash the church back then too. So Paul was trying to help them figure out what that could look like. And it says this in Romans 12, verse 1, so right at the start. And so, dear brothers and sisters, I plead with you to give your bodies to God because of all that he's done for you. Let them be a living and holy sacrifice, the kind that he would find acceptable. This is truly the way to worship him. To unleash the full force of the church, like if we were ever going to do that, what Paul says, and I agree with it, it's going to take sacrifice. For those of you in the room that consider yourselves to be a part of the church and you believe in Jesus, it's going to cost someone something. Like if we're really going to love a broken world and help heal it up the way that God wants to, we got to get our hands dirty, and it's going to cost you something. And Paul states that right off the bat. Up until this point, this is chapter 12. So he would have said 11 chapters worth of stuff up until this point. And I think it's important for some of you in the room to hear what he talked about. Paul has already told this church something that might be new information to some people in the room. Here's what it is, that people, by and large, are full of sin, which means we oftentimes do the thing that isn't what God would want. We hurt ourselves, we hurt each other, we hurt the world around us. It's true now, it's true back then. And that Jesus, in love, came to live with us and bring a kingdom of good news to a world that suffers from kingdoms of bad news. It was true then, and it's true now. He died, a death that he didn't deserve. They hung him on a cross, and he died. 3 days later, he walked out of a tomb. And because Jesus conquered the grave, if we put our faith and trust in him when we die, we won't have to be punished for our mistakes, but because Jesus overcame that for us, we can overcome death too. That's what Paul's talked about up until this point. And I just want some of you to know, because you've never been here before, and maybe you don't know that, but that's true. Because that's true, Paul writes what he writes in chapter 12. Paul told the church in Rome, and I'm telling you now, Jesus came and he died and he rose from the dead, and because of that, the world will never be the same. It's good news. Paul has explained that God has gone and made sacrifices for you and for me. God went to great lengths for you and for me. So he's asking, what are you willing to do for him? If that's true, what would you be willing to do for him? Unleashing the full force of the church is going to require that the people of the church make sacrifices. Again, if you're not a part of the church, no one would expect this of you. If you consider yourself to be a part of the church, to be unleashed is going to cost you something. But it also sounds like, I don't know if you caught this, it also sounds like Paul is warning us of something. It seems that there's this really urgent, he said, I urge you, like I'm pleading with you. Don't waste your life. Don't waste the body that God's given you. Those two things are pretty precious. I'm pleading with you. Listen to what I'm saying. Verse 2, he says this, don't copy the behavior and customs of this world. Behavior is what people do. Customs is like what's normal, right? Like what's normal in a place. So if the world has a way of doing things, and if the world has an expectation of what's normal, Paul's saying don't copy the world. Don't do that. He's like stressing this point very plainly. Why? Why does that matter? Why does he care so much? Why can't you just copy the world and do what everyone else is doing? Because if all we do is copy the world, we'll never be able to change it. If all you do is copy the world, how could you ever expect to be unleashed to change anything about it? And God wants to unleash the church to change the world with his love. God has a way of doing things, by the way. And he's not hiding his way of doing things. It's written in the Bible. And he's been pretty consistent on it for all time up until this point. God has a way of doing things. The world has a way of doing things. God's ways are pretty clear and constant from the beginning of time. And it is my opinion, as a 32-year-old person who's been in the world and tried to figure out what's going on in the world, that the world's ways and customs are confusing because they change every 3 days. I don't know what's going on half the time. The truth is that most people out there in the world who've decided to say no to anything having to do with God are making it up as we go along, and it's not working. If you are going to follow the world, you'll get confused really quick. If you're going to follow the world, behavior and customs, and throw God in the trash, I'm not sure what you're supposed to think about this election coming up. Again, I just don't know. If I'm that person and have thrown God away and I'm just copying and pasting whatever the world's doing, I don't know what I'm supposed to think is going to happen in November. I don't know what I'm supposed to think about, like screen usage, and does that matter? Does it not? Is it a big deal? Is it not a big deal? I don't know what I'm supposed to think about the rich and the poor. And if either group is bad or good, or like, what is money and what do I do with it and what does it matter? Like, I don't know what I'm supposed to think about that if I don't know God. Because it's changing every 3 days. I don't know what I'm supposed to think when wars start. And a couple of wars have started in the last couple of years. And again, if I don't know God, I don't know what to do with that. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with AI. I don't even know what I'm supposed to do with Post Malone's new album. Like, is he a rap artist or is he a country artist? I actually like it, but I'm also confused. Again, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with, is her name, is it Chapel? I don't know who that is. And maybe I'm supposed to know who that is, but like apparently she's more popular than Taylor Swift now, and I don't know what to do with that. I don't know. I didn't know 2 weeks ago that the word demure existed. And 2 weeks from now, I don't think you're gonna be saying it anymore. I'm just saying, again, all of this is making a very, very simple point, and I think you get my point. If I do things the way that the world does it, if I follow the behavior and the customs of the world, they're changing it all the time. They're making it up as they go along, and I get super confused on what I'm supposed to do and who I'm supposed to be. So what I do and who I am changes every 3 days with everyone else, and I feel lost. If you copy the behavior and customs of a world that is angry and is hectic and is divided and is anxious, it will serve you a life that looks angry and hectic and divided and anxious. Are you familiar with the, does anyone have a Mac and like you can do like Command C, Command V, like copy and paste? If you copy chaos, don't expect to paste peace in your life. If you copy destruction and hatred and violence, don't expect to paste healing on anything. If you copy the world, you're just gonna paste more of what's going on there, and it's not good because it's hurting you and it's hurting people you love. So Paul is urging you, and so am I, don't copy the behaviors and customs of the world. So what are you supposed to do instead? He goes on, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. To unleash the full force of the church, we have to start with transformation. It starts with transformation, and that transformation starts with you letting God do something that you could never do for yourself. Because if you could, you would have done it already. I see lots of like posts and different books and articles and like media out there trying to like crack the code on how we change our lives. It's been happening for a long time. I've talked to hundreds, maybe even thousands of high school students. I've been doing this for a long time. I have talked to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of high school students in my life who are trying to figure this out. Like they want to change, they want to be made new, they want to fix their lives, but they don't know what that looks like. Maybe some of you feel that way. Maybe some of you went to high school camp this summer and you're like, I think my life is broken, I want to fix it, but I don't know what that looks like. Just want to let you know. And they come to me, they ask me like, how do I fix my life? I always say, you're asking the wrong question. It's not about asking the question, how do I fix my life? It's asking, who am I becoming? It's not a question you ask me and I give you an answer. It's a question you have to ask yourself. Who am I becoming? Fixing yourself isn't something you could do anyways. God isn't asking you to do that. You could never do that. He's asking you to let him, and this takes trust, to let him make you into a new person by letting him renew your mind. Fixing implies that it can happen quickly. Like if I fix something in my house, there's a pretty good shot that I just do it that day. Transformation looks at your life and looks at your mistakes and looks at all the things that you've done, all the stupid stuff that you've said and done and whatever, it understands that transformation is a process. And you can look at a life where you've done a lot of really stupid things and broken things and hurt people, and you can say from now on, because that's actually all you have. You can't do anything about the thing you did. You can't do anything about the person you were in middle school, freshman. Like, that ship has sailed. Whoever you were in middle school, you can't change what happened there. All you have is from now on. So from now on, who are you becoming? Who are you becoming? Like, by the time you're in their seats, by the time you're a senior, who will you become? Because all you actually have is from now on. I'm choosing to let God help me become something that I can never be on my own. Becoming implies that it's a process, and that takes time. It also gives you grace to not be that good at it for a while. You won't be perfect next week, but you might be different next semester than you are now, because becoming takes time. It's a process. It gives you grace to fail at it a little bit while you work hard to get good at it down the road. So who are you becoming? And what is Paul talking about the mind for? Like, he mentions the mind in there. What Paul is getting at with that is that the mind is the battlefield where the war for you is taking place. Everybody wants to change. Like, again, talk to anyone on the street, anyone at school, anyone in your life. Everybody wants to change. Like, everybody wants something better. Everyone's trying to reinvent themselves all the time. I just want you to ask yourself these two questions. What do I love? Like, what do I really, really love? And what do I think about a lot? What do I love and what do I think about a lot? Because whatever your answer is to those two questions, look downstream and you'll just see more of that. You'll just see more of that stuff. You become like what you love and you become like what you think about. You tried to fix your life and the things that you did stupid last week. Who are you becoming? What do you love? What do you think about? When God changes a person's thinking, he changes the person. The church in Rome wanted to see Rome change. I think that's obvious. I think Paul was trying to help them with that. The church in Rome wanted to see Rome change, and it wasn't about putting the right Caesar in place. It wasn't about having an army with like horses and weapons and stuff. It wasn't about getting different statues put up. Places don't change because of those things. Places change when people change. And people change when they meet Jesus. My prayer is that you meet Jesus here tonight. Because, it says in the next verse, then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good, and it's pleasing, and it's perfect. If there is really a God out there, like for real, if there's actually a God that exists in this world, then that means that he made you. And if he made you, he didn't do it on accident. He's probably really smart and really powerful and doesn't do things on accident. He does things on purpose. So if he made you on purpose, then I think he has a plan for you. And if that's the case, like even the word will in that verse there, the word will, like the Greek word for that would be thelema. It means like heart or desire. Like, what's his heart for you? Do you think the God that created you has a desire or a heart for what your life's supposed to look like? Yes. And Paul is telling you that life is good. You know what the Greek word for that literally translates to? Good. Because it is. Ask any leader sitting in the row with you who's been following Jesus for a long time. They don't regret it. Because a life with him is good. It's pleasing. Another way to say that is like it's acceptable. Like if I was to write down what the life looked like on a piece of paper, slide it across to you, you'd be like, yeah, I accept that. You wouldn't reject it. It's acceptable to you. It's appealing. It's good. Oh, wait. Let me up the ante. It's perfect. It's perfect. Your life won't be perfect, but the deal he's sliding over the table to you is a life that it was fit for you and made for you. Your life is broken. I'm not saying it to be rude, I'm saying it to be honest. Your life is broken. If you could ever get to a humble enough place in your life, you would admit it. And you walk into another school year limping from the wounds that were dealt to you, whether it was from the summer or last year or whatever it is. And the good news that I hope you hear tonight is that Jesus is offering a new life if you want one. He's offering you a new life. He is good at transforming and unleashing people into the world who help change the world. People like Peter, who was a fisherman and had no education, and he started the church. People like Saul, who killed Christians for a living and then got a new life, started going by Paul, led the church, wrote the letter you're reading tonight. You think that guy who's writing these words knows something about how Jesus can change a person? His name used to be Saul and he used to kill Christians. Now he's teaching you something about what it means to follow Jesus. Don't tell me God can't transform people and then send them into the world to transform the world. In March of this year, Lucas Jacoby was invited to HSM by Noah Rechtenwald. They both go to Eastern High School. Noah had been praying for his friend and told Brock and I about it. He wanted him to come to church and hear about Jesus. He came to one night back in March. We had like a March Madness themed one night. And we actually, the three of us out there prayed for Lucas because we knew that he had questions about God. We knew that he was curious, but he wasn't there yet. Lucas had been struggling and went through a really hard situation. He lost a close friend. And Lucas came to one night that night. And he had fun with us, and he met Jesus. And Lucas ends up making a decision to let Jesus transform his life. He made a decision to trust Jesus and be baptized and step into that new life. So this happened over Easter weekend, right before spring break. And from that point on, Lucas had a new way of thinking. That suddenly he was living for Jesus and for his mission, and he was unleashed to love people one at a time. Last weekend, Noah and I step on stage to talk about all that God has done for us in the past year on Student Takeover Weekend. So that's Noah and I. In that same service, guess who's in the baptism waters with someone else? Lucas Jacoby is in the water with another friend from Eastern who didn't know Jesus and was ready for a new life, named Jonah. Here's the point. I asked you earlier if you could transform your school, what would you change? Noah's prayer for Eastern was probably that God would help broken, hurting people see his love and grace. So God sent Noah to love Lucas. And then God sent Lucas to love Jonah. Jesus changes places by changing people. God has good plans for Eastern. If you go there, I promise you, God has a good plan for Eastern High School this year. But what is Eastern? It's not a building. It's not a tech program. It's not an eagle. Like, Eastern is a group of people. Eastern's a group of people at the end of the day. Take everything else away. What is Eastern? It's a collection of students. So if God is going to change Eastern, he's going to do that by changing people. People want to change Cal. You hear that every year. We want to change Manual. We want to change Portland. Change Sacred Heart. If you're a homeschool student, maybe there's something going on in your home and you want to see God transform and change and move that. Or maybe for a homeschool student, you go to school at home, but like you work at Seven Brew or Chick-fil-A or something like that, and you want to see different people in those spaces changed. I'm just telling you, God wants that too. But the starting place is letting him change us. The starting place is letting him change us. We want to unleash the full force of the church to love people one at a time. And for students, like for you, that's happening for the most part in schools, at practice, at work, at band, in different co-ops or whatever it is that you do. And his plan to change these places is people. And it's not a bad plan. It's a really good one. And it happens one at a time. It starts with you making a choice. What will you let God do in your life so that God can work through you this year? He has good plans for you and for where you're going. And he wants to transform you and transform where you are. Here's what I want us to do tonight. We're going to go into a time of worship and prayer. We're going to sing a couple more songs. And what we thought, because you guys are decked out in some of your